A fist slammed into a steel locker. The sound echoed through the laundry room. A second man stepped sideways and blocked the only door. A third pulled a sharpened toothbrush from his sleeve and turned it slow in his fingers. The new inmate stood with a folded uniform pressed to his chest. He did not lift his eyes. He did not lift his hands. He said 5 words into the concrete floor. "I do not want trouble." The biggest of the 3 laughed. He stepped close enough that their boots almost touched. He told the new man to set the uniform down and empty his commissary slip. The new man did not move. His name was Daniel Reyes. He was 52. He had been inside the walls for 90 minutes. What he did next made the entire cell block go silent for 3 days. Stay with me on this one. The bus had pulled into Tucker Maximum Security at 6:14 that morning. Fog was still pressed against the towers. 18 men in orange jumpsuits stepped off in a slow line. Most looked at the ground. 2 looked at the gun towers. 1, a quiet gray-haired man near the back, looked at every guard one at a time, then at every camera, then at the angles of the fences, and then at the ground like the others. He did it so smoothly that no one noticed. He was counting. He was already counting. Inside processing, he gave his name as Daniel Reyes. Charge federal wire fraud. Sentence 60 months. He answered every question in a soft, careful voice. He did not look afraid. He did not look brave. He looked like a man who had spent his whole life filling out forms in small offices. The intake officer barely glanced at his file. Another bookkeeper who got greedy. The officer stamped the page and waved him through. What the intake officer did not see was the second file. That file did not exist on any computer inside Tucker. It existed in a locked drawer in a federal building 300 miles away. The name on it was not Daniel Reyes. The photograph showed the same gray-haired man, 20 years younger in desert camouflage, beside a Black Hawk helicopter. The file used 3 words to describe what he had done for a living. Special Mission Unit. He had retired 4 years earlier. He had a small cabin in the mountains and a dog named Junior. His wife had died of cancer 3 years before that. He fished in the mornings. He read history books in the afternoons. Trouble found him in the form of a phone call from a man he had once trusted with his life, who now worked at the FBI field office in Little Rock. The bureau had a problem inside Tucker. A guard-run smuggling ring moving heroin and phones and weapons through the laundry. 3 dead inmates in 18 months. 2 informants who had simply vanished. They had no one on the inside they could trust because half the guards were in on it and the rest were afraid. They needed a ghost. Someone old enough to look harmless. Someone calm enough to wait. Someone trained enough to survive when the wrong people figured out who he really was. Daniel had said no twice. He said yes the 3rd time. He said yes because the man on the phone had told him about a young correctional officer named Marcus Hill, who had refused a bribe and was found hanged in his apartment with a suicide note in handwriting that was not his. Marcus Hill had a 4-year-old daughter. That detail changed Daniel's mind. So now he stood in Tucker Maximum with a folded uniform and a number stenciled on his chest. He let the guards push him. He let other inmates step in front of him in the chow line. He kept his eyes down and his shoulders soft. He was building his cover 1 boring second at a time. He had done it before in places much worse than Arkansas. Then the laundry assignment came down on his 2nd hour. A guard named Pratt walked him to the basement. Pratt did not say a word the whole way. He opened the steel door, stepped back, and looked at his own boots. Daniel understood what that meant. He had seen guards look at their boots in 3 different countries. It meant the room was not empty, and the guard knew it. The shot caller of D Block was a man named Bones Mercer. He was 41 years old. He stood 6 feet 4. He had a thick neck and a shaved head and a crow tattoo across his throat. He had killed 2 men inside Tucker and 1 outside it, and the prosecutors could only prove the outside one. He ran every illegal thing that moved through D Block, but he did not run it for himself. He ran it for the guards who ran it for someone higher than that. In exchange, he made sure every new arrival paid tribute on day one. That was the rule. Daniel walked into the laundry. He saw 3 men. He saw the door close behind him. He saw the toothbrush come out of the sleeve. And he saw, in that first half-second, the small camera in the corner of the room with a piece of black tape stuck over the lens. Whoever was watching the monitors was not watching this room. That was on purpose. That meant whatever was about to happen in here was already approved. Bones Mercer told him to set the uniform on the table. Daniel set the uniform on the table. Bones told him to empty his commissary slip. Daniel did not move. Bones took 1 step closer. Bones said the same thing again, slower. And Daniel, in a voice so quiet that the man by the door had to lean forward to hear it, said the 5 words that everyone in cell block D would be repeating by sundown. "I do not want trouble." Bones laughed. He turned to the man by the door and said, "Look at this little accountant." He turned back. He raised the back of his hand to slap Daniel across the face. He never finished the motion. There are things a body remembers even after the body is 52 years old, and the hair is gray, and the back is stiff. The hand that came up to block the slap did not look fast. It looked almost gentle. But it landed on the inside of Bones Mercer's wrist at exactly the spot where the radial nerve runs closest to the skin. Bones's whole arm went numb to the shoulder. Bones blinked. He did not understand what had just happened. He tried to make a fist with that hand. The fingers would not close. He looked down at his own arm like it belonged to a stranger. And in that 1 second of confusion, Daniel did 3 things in a sequence so smooth that the man by the door later swore it looked like one motion. He stepped behind Bones. He hooked an ankle. He guided Bones to the concrete floor face down with a hand on the back of the neck, so soft that there was barely a sound when 6 feet 4 of muscle and bone came to rest. The toothbrush shank fell from the 3rd man's fingers. It bounced once and rolled. Daniel did not chase it. He did not need to. He looked up at the 2 men still standing. His voice did not rise. He said the same 5 words again. "I do not want trouble." Then he said one more sentence. He said, "Pick up your friend and walk out, and we will pretend this did not happen." The man by the door opened the door. The man with the empty hand bent down. Together they lifted Bones Mercer, who was still trying to remember how to feel his fingers, and they carried him out of the laundry room. They did not look back. Daniel walked to the camera in the corner. He reached up. He peeled the black tape off the lens with 2 fingers. He folded the tape in half and put it in his pocket. He went back to the table. He picked up his folded uniform. He carried it back to his cell. He sat on the edge of the bunk. He breathed in for 4 counts and out for 6, the way he had been taught a long time ago. And then he stood up, washed his hands in the small steel sink, and walked out to chow as if nothing in the world had happened. That night the entire cell block was quiet. The kind of quiet a prison does not normally do. Men who had not stopped talking in 6 years stopped talking. The card game broke up early. Word had moved through the block by whisper and by glance, and the whisper said the same thing in every cell. The new old man put Bones Mercer on the floor with 1 hand, and Bones carried himself out without a fight. Nobody knew what to do with that information. So nobody did anything at all. A guard named Vance walked the tier at lights out. Vance was 47, soft in the belly, with a small silver cross on a chain inside his collar. Vance was one of the guards on the smuggling ring's payroll. He had been on the payroll for 9 years. He stopped in front of cell 204. Daniel was lying on his back with his hands folded on his chest. Vance looked at him for a long moment. Daniel looked at the ceiling. Vance moved on. He did not say a word. But when he reached the end of the tier, he took out his phone, the one the inmates were not supposed to know he had, and he sent a single text message to a number that was not in his contacts. The message was 4 words long. We have a problem. The next morning, Daniel got his coffee from the chow line and sat at an empty table near the wall. He took one sip. He set the cup down. He read the back of a cereal box like a man who had nowhere to be. The room was loud around him. The chairs scraped. The trays clattered. Somewhere a man laughed too hard at his own joke. For a moment, just a moment, it felt almost normal. Like a cafeteria in a high school. Like a place where nothing very bad was about to happen. Daniel took a second sip of coffee. He liked the coffee. He had not expected to. Then a folded square of paper landed in the middle of his tray. A hand had dropped it from behind him. The hand was already gone before he turned. He opened the paper slowly under the edge of the table. There were 3 words written in pencil in shaky block letters. They were not a threat. They were a warning. And the warning was about something far bigger than Bones Mercer. The 3 words on the paper were laundry tomorrow night. Under those 3 words were 2 more. Bring nothing. Daniel folded the paper into a smaller square. He put it inside the lining of his sock under the table. He finished his coffee. He went back to his cell. He sat down on the bunk. And for the first time since he had walked through the front gate of Tucker, his heart rate climbed past 80. Because the laundry was not where Bones Mercer ran his shakedowns. The laundry was where the guards moved the heroin in. Twice a week, a private contractor backed a white van to the loading dock. The van was supposed to drop off detergent and pick up dirty uniforms. What it actually dropped off was wrapped in plastic and slid behind the third dryer. What it picked up was payment, sealed in a coffee can, slid back the other way. The whole transfer took 90 seconds. It happened at 2 in the morning. And someone in this prison, someone who must have figured out at least part of who Daniel Reyes really was, wanted him to see it. That was the trigger. That was the thing that changed the nature of what he was inside Tucker for. Until that note, he had been a man building a slow, careful case from the inside, the way the Bureau had asked him to. He had expected to spend 3 months memorizing routines, identifying players, photographing handoffs with a button camera the FBI was supposed to smuggle to him through a chaplain. He had expected patience. He had expected boredom. He had expected to come out alive in 90 days with a file thick enough to hand to a grand jury. Now somebody inside the walls knew. Maybe not all of it. Maybe not the Delta Force part. But enough to slide a note onto his tray. The moment a single inmate knew, the clock on his life started ticking. Inside Tucker, secrets do not stay still. A day. 2 days. A week at most. After that, whoever was running the ring would know there was a federal asset in the block. And then they would do what they had done to Marcus Hill. Only this time, it would be a shank in a stairwell, and the cameras would happen to be looking the other way. He had 2 choices. He could request emergency extraction. He could go to the warden, identify himself, and walk out of Tucker by lunchtime with the case unfinished, and the ring still standing and Marcus Hill's 4-year-old daughter still without a father and no justice on the books. Or he could move the timeline. He could compress 3 months of work into 72 hours. He could turn the trap that had been set for him into a trap he set for them. He chose the second one. He started right there on the bunk, with the cereal box note inside his sock, by closing his eyes and walking through every door, every camera, every guard rotation, every blind spot he had cataloged in the last 24 hours. He had a working map of Tucker in his head by lunch. He had a plan by dinner. By the time the lights went down on his second night inside, he had also decided who he was going to need help from. And it was not the FBI. It was a man 2 cells down, who had been watching him very carefully since the laundry. A short, wiry inmate, 58 years old, named Earl Briggs. Earl was doing 19 years for armed robbery. Earl had also, 20 years before that, been a county sheriff in eastern Texas. Earl had figured something out about Daniel in the chow line that morning. Earl had also written the note. If you are still with me, hit that subscribe button. The next 24 hours inside Tucker Maximum get worse than anything I have described so far. Now back to Daniel and the man 2 cells down. Earl Briggs slid onto the bench across from Daniel at the next morning's breakfast. He did it the way men do it in prison when they want a conversation no one else hears. He sat sideways. He kept his hands on the table. He kept his voice under the noise of the room. He said one sentence. "You move like a man who used to wear a uniform that did not have a number on it." Daniel did not answer. Earl smiled a small, tired smile and said, "Relax. I am not asking your business. I am offering mine." Earl had been inside Tucker for 11 years. He had been keeping a notebook the whole time. The notebook was small enough to fit inside a hollowed-out paperback Bible on the shelf above his bunk. Inside in tiny block letters were dates, names, initials of guards, license plates of 2 different white vans, the exact time to the minute of every 2 o'clock handoff Earl had ever heard from the laundry vent, because the vent ran straight up through the wall behind his bunk, and Earl had spent 11 years in that bunk with nothing to do but listen. Earl had figured Daniel out for one reason. He had seen Daniel scan the room. Not the way a frightened new inmate scans, in panic sweeps. The way a trained man scans. In a sequence. Door, corner, camera, hands, exits. Earl had been a cop long enough, a long time ago, to know that sequence on sight. He did not know who Daniel worked for. He did not care. He had been waiting 11 years for somebody who could do something with what he had written down. He thought maybe that somebody had just walked onto his block. Daniel listened. Daniel asked one question. He asked if Earl had ever told anyone else. Earl said no. Earl said the only reason he was telling Daniel now was because he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and the prison doctor had told him 3 weeks ago that he had less than 6 months to live, and Earl had decided he was not going to take 11 years of notes to the grave, so a bunch of crooked guards could go on smuggling heroin through the same laundry that gave him his prison clothes. Earl wanted the notebook to do one useful thing before he died. Daniel took a long, slow breath. He looked at Earl Briggs across that table. He saw a man who knew he was dying and who had nothing left to lose and who had been waiting for a chance to be brave one more time. Daniel made a decision. He told Earl in the smallest voice possible 4 words. "I can use that." That night after lights out, 2 things happened at the same time inside Tucker. In cell block D, Earl Briggs sat on the edge of his bunk and tore a single page from the back of his notebook. He copied onto that page the next 2 scheduled van drops. The first was at 2 a.m. the following night. The second was 48 hours after that. He folded the page tight. He stuck it inside a chewed flat piece of bread. He waited. Outside the walls, 300 miles away, a federal agent named Sarah Coe opened a sealed envelope that had been dropped at the chaplain's office that afternoon and walked out of the prison in the chaplain's car. Inside the envelope was a single line written in pencil, in Daniel Reyes's careful printing. "Move the timeline. Be at the loading dock at 1:50 a.m. tomorrow with a full team. Confirm by leaving the chapel light on tomorrow at 6. Daniel Reyes sat in his cell. He waited. At 6 the next morning, the chapel light came on. He saw it through his window the same way a man at sea sees a lighthouse. He nodded once to himself. The trap was set. The only question now was who would walk into it first. The smugglers, or the men inside the prison who had been sent to kill him before the smugglers ever arrived. The first attempt came at lunch. A man called Tiny, 300 pounds and bald, sat down across from Daniel with a plastic fork and waited. He waited for Daniel to take a bite of his food. Daniel did not take a bite. Daniel had watched Tiny carry his tray from the line. Daniel had seen Tiny's hand pass over Daniel's plate for less than a second on the way down. It had been enough. There was a small wet shine at the edge of the rice that was not gravy. Daniel pushed the tray 6 inches toward Tiny and said in a soft voice, "You take it." Tiny stared at him. Tiny stood up. Tiny walked away. The second attempt came in the yard, 90 minutes later. Two men with prison-made knives drifted toward Daniel from two angles while he stood near the basketball court. They did it slow, the way coyotes pick a calf. They never got there. Earl Briggs walked between them with a friendly smile and a cup of water and accidentally on purpose tripped and spilled the water across one of the men. While that man cursed and shoved Earl back, the other man got within 4 feet of Daniel before two guards walked straight up to him and asked to see his hands. The knife clattered to the dirt. The man was led away. Earl did not look at Daniel even once. By the time chow opened that evening, Daniel had been the target of 2 attempts on his life in 7 hours. He sat with his back to the wall. He ate the bread Earl had left on his bunk. He bit down and felt the folded paper inside it. He pulled it out under cover of his sleeve. He read it. He memorized the times. He chewed the paper and the bread together and swallowed both. He went back to his cell at lockdown. He lay on his bunk in the dark. He listened to the tier. At 12:47 a.m., the lights in cell block D flickered for half a second. That was the signal. Earl Briggs, 2 cells down, kicked the bottom of his bunk twice. That was the answer. Daniel Reyes sat up. He put on his boots. He waited. At 12:50 exactly, the magnetic lock on his door released with a soft, heavy click. The door opened 2 inches by itself. It opened because in the control room, a young guard named Officer Daniels, the partner of the late Marcus Hill, had just made the first brave decision of his career. He had typed in the override code he was not supposed to know. He had let Daniel out. Daniel walked the empty tier in his sock feet, boots in one hand. He went down the stairwell. He went through a service corridor with cameras that had, somehow, looped to a still image of the empty hallway 40 minutes earlier. He came out behind the laundry. He stopped at the corner. He waited. At 1:22 a.m., a white van pulled to the loading dock. The driver killed the engine. He waited. He smoked half a cigarette. He flicked it onto the asphalt. He climbed out. He opened the back doors. 2 men inside the prison, both guards in dark uniforms with the patches turned inward so the names did not show, came out to meet him. Daniel watched from the corner. He counted the bricks. He counted the bricks of plastic-wrapped product the men unloaded from the van. There were 14. He counted again to be sure. 14. He saw the coffee can come back the other way, heavy with cash. He saw the can change hands one more time as the senior of the 2 guards passed it inside the laundry door to a third man, who Daniel could not yet see clearly. Daniel waited until the van doors closed. He waited until the driver was halfway back to the cab. And then he stepped out from behind the corner. He did not have a gun. He did not need one. He was not there to stop the van. The team Sarah Coe had brought was there to stop the van. 12 federal agents in dark vests, with rifles raised, came around 3 different corners at the exact same second. The driver froze with the door handle in his hand. The 2 guards in unmarked uniforms turned and saw the rifles and made the only smart decision either of them had made in 5 years. They put their hands on their heads and went to their knees on the wet asphalt. The third man inside the laundry tried to run. He went out the back through a door he thought no one knew existed. He came face to face with Daniel Reyes, standing alone in the corridor. The man pulled a small pistol from his waistband. Daniel took it from him so fast and so gently that the man later told investigators he did not remember the pistol leaving his hand. Daniel set the pistol on the floor. He set the man on the floor next to it. He used a zip tie he had braided from his uniform's drawstring 40 minutes earlier. He looked at the man's face under the overhead bulb. And for the first time, Daniel Reyes recognized him. The third man was the deputy warden of Tucker Maximum Security. His name was Howard Vance. He was the cousin of the guard Vance who had walked the tier the first night. He was the man at the top of the smuggling ring inside the prison. He had personally signed the paperwork that had moved Marcus Hill's case file into a folder marked closed. He had personally written the line in that folder that said cause of death, self-inflicted. Daniel looked at Howard Vance for a long moment. He did not hit him. He did not say a word to him. He stood up. He walked back down the corridor. He let the agents take Howard Vance out in a line with the others. By sunrise, the federal agents had arrested 9 men. 6 guards, 2 outside contractors, 1 deputy warden. The seized heroin weighed in at 18 kilograms. The notebook Earl Briggs handed over at 7 that morning lined up perfectly with bank records the Bureau had been subpoenaing for 2 years and had never been able to match. The case would eventually grow to include a state senator and 2 members of the parole board. But all of that came later. That morning in the warden's office, Earl Briggs and Daniel Reyes sat in 2 folding chairs and drank coffee out of paper cups and did not say anything to each other for a long time. Daniel left Tucker the same way he had come in, on a bus. He carried no folded uniform this time. He wore plain clothes the Bureau had brought for him. He watched the towers shrink in the side mirror. He thought about Marcus Hill's daughter, who lived in a small house in Little Rock with her grandmother, and who would in 2 weeks receive a letter from the Department of Justice telling her that the men responsible for her father's death would never walk free again. The letter would not bring her father back. Daniel knew that. But it was the only thing he had to give her. So he had given it. Bones Mercer woke up in the prison infirmary 2 days after the raid. His arm worked again. His reputation did not. The men in cell block D no longer looked at him the way they had before. They looked at the empty bunk in cell 204 instead, where the quiet new inmate had slept for 3 nights and then disappeared on a bus before lunch. They told the story to each new arrival for years. In some versions, Daniel was a CIA assassin. In some versions, he was a wronged accountant who had snapped. None of those versions were true. But the 5 words at the center of the story never changed. I do not want trouble. Men in cell block D would whisper those words to each other for the next 10 years, every time somebody new and quiet walked onto the tier. Earl Briggs lived another 4 months. The Bureau quietly transferred him to a federal medical facility with a private room and a window. His daughter, who had not visited him in 9 years, drove up from Houston the week after the transfer. She brought her 2 boys with her. They sat with him in the sun every afternoon for the last 6 weeks of his life. The day Earl died, the notebook from the Hollow Bible was returned to his daughter along with his other personal effects. She kept it in a drawer in her kitchen. She told her sons one day they could read it. Their grandfather had done one important thing at the end. Officer Daniels, the young guard who had typed in the override code, was promoted to lieutenant. He kept Marcus Hill's name tag in his locker. He looked at it every morning before his shift. He stayed at Tucker for another 12 years. He never took a single dollar he was not supposed to take. When he retired, he went to Marcus Hill's daughter's high school graduation. He sat in the back. He did not introduce himself. He just wanted to see her walk across the stage. He saw her. He slept better that night than he had slept in a long time. Daniel Reyes went back to his cabin in the mountains. Junior, the dog, was waiting on the porch. The Bureau offered him a commendation. He declined it. The Bureau offered him a job. He declined that too. He sat on the porch in the evenings. He read his history books. He fished in the mornings. He did not look for trouble. Trouble did not find him again for a long time after that. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind moved through the pines and the dog slept at his feet, Daniel Reyes thought about the laundry room in Tucker. He thought about the moment Bones Mercer had raised his hand. He thought about the camera in the corner with the black tape over its lens. He thought about Marcus Hill's daughter, and about Earl Briggs's grandsons one day reading the notebook, and about Officer Daniels typing a code he was not supposed to know. He thought about how a man can say 5 quiet words in a concrete basement, and how those 5 words, "if the man is the right man," can be louder than any weapon ever made. I do not want trouble. He had meant it every single time. The world had simply, finally, learned to believe him.